So here's a fun one that came in the other day. This is an electric bike that the owner of the bike brought it in and reported that the pedal assist is not working. So normally when you pedal it, the motor should kick in and move you on along, and it is not doing that on this particular bike. So as far as diagnosing these things, the first thing I like to do is go through and make sure that all of the electrical connections are solid. Sometimes these plugs can come undone or just rattle loose, so I like to make sure that all of those connections, there's several here next to the controller, there's several more here going up to the brake levers. All of these seem to be connected properly. We're going to go ahead and cycle the power on. Up front here, there's a small control panel. We're going to try to turn this thing on, and usually you hold the power button down and it turns the display on, and there's nothing happening there. So even when you crank the pedals, the motor is not kicking in. So so much for that. So where do you go from there? Well, I like to usually start with the battery. Let's make sure that the battery is holding a charge. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect that. On this style battery, there are several connections inside of there, and usually they're connected in parallel. So there's two positives and two negatives. We're just going to take a voltmeter and put it on there and see if we're getting power. And I'm not getting any power on the, well, let's turn it on first. There it goes. Now we're getting power. We're getting 41 volts. Which is what you would expect. This is a 36 volt battery, so this is a fully charged battery, so that part is working properly. Next thing I want to do is try out the controller to see if maybe the controller is malfunctioning. So we're going to go ahead and put the battery back in, and we're going to put in, this is a different controller, we're just going to go ahead and disconnect the onboard one and plug in this replacement one here, and see if we can get any power out of it when we try powering it up with this. And you can see it lit up for a second and then it went out, which makes me think it's probably something going on in the controller. So what we might try to do is try bypassing the controller, and let's see what happens when we do that. So the controller for this particular bike is built into the battery bracket. So when you connect the battery, the controller is actually part of this mechanism, which can be a problem. If you decide that you want to replace the controller, you have to replace the entire bracket. This is not as bad as some other ones I've seen. There's some bikes I've seen where the controllers are built into the inside of the motor, where if your controller goes bad, then you have to replace multiple parts, where at least with this one you can just bypass the controller and try to make it work. So what I've got is a separate outboard controller. We're going to try plugging this in and see what kind of results we get when we use a different controller on it. So let's see what happens with that. So on this style of connectors, the ones with the orange connector goes to the pedal assist. So that's essentially a sensor that sits on the inside of the crank and lets the controller know when the pedals are working so that it starts the motor working along with it. We also have a separate connector here. This is going to run to a harness, which will run to the keypad, which will allow us to turn it on and off, and also change the settings on the bike. So on this style, the green connector goes to your keypad. And you'll notice there are red connectors. Those go to the brakes, but in this situation, we're not going to be worrying about the brakes. So let's see what happens when we finish connecting this up. So in this case, I've taken an older controller that's gone bad, and I've gutted it, and I'm using this so that I can connect the battery to the controller here. So our battery is just going to simply connect onto this guy here, and then we should be able to run our power connectors. And turn it on. And let's see if we get power going to our keypad here. So this lights up, so now we know the controller is working. So our controller was part of the problem. We're getting full batteries, which shows that our battery is working properly. And if we set our pedal assist up, you can hear the motor fires right up. So it seems pretty obvious to me that the problem is we got a faulty controller on this particular bike. Obviously, doing diagnostics like this aren't that simple unless you have spare parts laying around, so I wish there was some easier way that I could give you that you could diagnose these sort of things, but unfortunately you're going to need to have a couple of functional pieces of equipment in order to test. We could tell that the motor works, so that's something we don't have to worry about. The other question is, does the existing keypad work on this? So I'm going to try removing this keypad and plug it in to the other one. And see if we get power from here, which we do not. So in this case, we've actually got two things that have gone bad. We've got both the controller and the keypad are not functional. So we're going to have to replace both of these. Hopefully this style controller is not terribly proprietary, so hopefully we can get that. This is one of the reasons why I really like to have a separate outboard controller that's not attached to any other system, so you can just simply swap them out without having to disassemble half of the bike to get to it. I'm really not a big fan of a lot of the bikes that have the battery built into the frame, because you're really locked into a very close-ended system. So if you're in the market for an electric bike and you see ones that have integral batteries that are part of the frame, I would avoid them and get ones that have batteries that are in a location that if you need to replace it with a different battery, you could very easily do that, because some of these companies are not the easiest to get in touch with when you do need to get replacement parts. So that's a good little piece of advice that you may want to consider when you're in the market for an electric bike. So got this one figured out. It's a bad controller, bad keypad. Get this guy back on the road real soon. And till the next time, don't let the bastards get you down.